Hi and welcome to my review of The Goodies, the complete BBC collection. Today we're up to Alternative Routes. The Goodies each explored their roots and ancestry and how each of their ancestors was captured and sold at a slave auction to the entertainment industry. But when the chaps are sold to the black and white minstrel show, they lead a rebellion that turns the BBC on its head. Now, as we begin season 7, I was very sad to notice that the fabulous psychedelic-looking purple curtains have gone from the set, only to be replaced by some really boring-looking curtains. I thought Hoots was a fantastic send-up of roots and features some really funny visual gags. Likewise with Fruits, Bill's ancestry segment. Now, I've got to admit that I felt a little bit of trepidation about watching this episode as it famously contains blackface. And while it is uncomfortable to see people performing in blackface, I think it's really important to look at the context and the point the boys are trying to make here. In the scene where they are forced to become black and white minstrels, their commentary, their discussion with each other is about how ridiculous it is and how degrading, and they actually do use the word degrading. In this episode and in this particular scene, the boys are actually addressing the popularity of the black and white minstrel show and why and how it was so popular. They're explicitly questioning why a show featuring blackface was on the air and why it was popular. And in this scene, they even allude to the ratings of the black and white minstrel show, and they address the fact that the black and white minstrel show tried doing episodes without the blackface makeup and that it was not as popular. I felt that this was a really interesting scene, and it shows that behind the comedy, the Goodies are appalled by the black and white minstrel show and its popularity. What they're doing here is confronting the viewer with all of these questions. They are wanting us to look at blackface, to be confronted by it, and to think about how we feel about it and why it's acceptable at this point in time. The extension of this is when they add blackface to a range of shows that were popular at that time, all of which show how ridiculous and absurd the practice was. I feel like what they're trying to do is to really confront the viewer and ask them, how is this acceptable in any context? And they're also doing that in the context of their own show. It's absurd here, it's grotesque and ridiculous, so how is it acceptable in any other show? Although I was nervous about how they would treat this subject, I found it a very pointed satire and a very powerful one. A couple of side notes. I did notice some bad wig continuity. Bill's wig does not match in the studio scenes and in the film segments. And unfortunately, in this episode, that synthesizer music is back, and it's back with a vengeance, and it is pretty annoying, I'm sorry to say. This episode's guest stars included Bryan Pringle, Charlie Stewart, Stuart Fell, and Max Faulkner. I think Alternative Routes is an interesting and really thought-provoking episode. Something I've noticed in talking with people about the Goodies in real life is that very often what they'll say, people who don't know the show, will say, oh, they did blackface sometimes, didn't they? And I get the feeling that a lot of people have sort of cancelled the Goodies on account of this perception. And what I would say to people like that is watch this episode and really listen to what they're saying, really look at what they're doing, because I think they've got a really strong point to make about blackface and how appalling they thought it was. I suspect that message might be being lost today because a lot of people will just see the image of blackface and automatically assume there's some, racist agenda at play. But while blackface is very uncomfortable to watch, I think what they're trying to do here is something worthwhile. The execution might not be perfect, but I think if you really listen to what's being said here and the intent behind it, I think they're really trying to do something which is in opposition to blackface and the racism behind it. As has been pointed out by Tim and many other people, the Black and White Minstrel Show was one of the most popular shows on the BBC at this time. The fact that the Goodies used their show to savage a show that was so popular on their own network, I think is a very bold and daring move on their part. I think what the goodies are also asking with this episode, particularly because they bring in the element of Roots, an amazing TV phenomenon that really delved into the painful history of the African American experience, was why was a show like The Black and White Minstrels on air at all at this time? And why was it popular? These are some strong and confronting questions, and I imagine they would have been very much so at the time of the show's release. And I've got to say, I admire the goodies for once again tackling the issue of racism in their comedy series. Thank you so much for watching today, and I hope you'll join me next time when we move on to Dodo Nuts. I'll see you then. Bye.